My name is Ethan Ford, and I used to believe in happy endings. That was before I found the videos on my wife's laptop, before I learned that trust is just another word for stupidity, and before I discovered that revenge tastes better than Maine lobster when served ice cold. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. It started on a Tuesday night in October. Vanessa was giggling at her phone again, hunched over like a teenager hiding secrets from her parents. The blue light from the screen painted her face in ghostly hues, and for a moment, she looked like a stranger. "Work stuff," she said, without looking up when she caught me staring. Derek's being his usual dramatic self about the Morrison account. Derek Harlan, her boss at the advertising agency. The kind of man who wore expensive suits to hide his cheap soul, who drove a BMW convertible in a state where it snowed 6 months out of the year. I'd met him at company parties, watched him work rooms like a politician, all white teeth and firm handshakes. "Must be pretty funny work stuff," I said, settling into my recliner with a beer. The leather creaked under my weight, a sound that had become as familiar as Vanessa's lies. She finally looked up, her green eyes flashing with something I couldn't quite identify. Irritation, maybe. Or guilt. "You know how he is. Always trying to lighten the mood with jokes." I nodded and took a sip of my Budweiser, letting the bitter taste wash away the bitter taste of her deception. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? I'd been married to Vanessa Ford for 8 years, and I knew the difference between her work laugh and her genuine laugh. This was neither. This was something else entirely. After she went to bed, I sat in my basement workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade. I'd been an accountant once, back when I believed numbers always added up correctly. Now I fix things for a living. Kitchen cabinets, broken faucets, shattered trust. Well, maybe not that last one. The house creaked above me as Vanessa moved around, probably getting ready for another early meeting tomorrow. She'd been having a lot of those lately. Early meetings, late meetings, weekend strategy sessions. For someone who worked in advertising, she sure was dedicated to her craft. I pulled out my laptop and did something I never thought I'd do. I researched spy software, not the dramatic Hollywood kind, the simple, effective kind that real people used when their world started crumbling around them. 20 minutes later, I downloaded a GPS tracking app and learned how to install it remotely on someone's phone. The next morning, Vanessa kissed my cheek before heading out, her perfume lingering in the air like evidence at a crime scene. "Don't wait up tonight," she said. "Big presentation tomorrow, so we'll probably work late." "Good luck," I said, and meant it. She was going to need all the luck she could get. I waited 30 minutes before checking the GPS. She wasn't at her office. She was at the Ocean View Hotel, the fancy place down by the marina where out-of-town executives stayed when they wanted to impress clients, or when they wanted privacy. My hands shook as I grabbed my keys. 8 years of marriage, and it was ending in a hotel parking garage while I crouched behind a concrete pillar like some discount private investigator. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my whole career following paper trails, and now I was following my wife. I saw them through the hotel's glass doors, Vanessa and Derek sitting close together at a corner table in the restaurant, her hand covering his. She was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The one she claimed made her feel beautiful. Apparently, it made Derek feel something too. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't notice me taking pictures through the window. My phone's camera wasn't great, but it was good enough to capture the way she touched his face, the way he leaned in to whisper something that made her throw back her head and laugh. That genuine laugh I hadn't heard in months. I was so focused on documenting their betrayal that I almost missed the man approaching from behind. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested he wasn't just out for a casual stroll. "You lost, buddy?" The voice was gravelly, unfriendly. I turned to find a man in his 30s studying me with suspicious eyes. He had the look of someone who solved problems with his fists first and asked questions later. "Just waiting for someone," I said, trying to sound casual while my heart hammered against my ribs. "Yeah? Who's that?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Working through lunch. Don't know when I'll be home. Love you." The man, Shane, I'd later learn, was still watching me. I pocketed my phone and walked away, feeling his eyes on my back until I reached my truck. That night, I sat in my basement workshop and made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out exactly how deep this betrayal went, and then I was going to make them pay for it. Not with violence. I wasn't that kind of man. But there were other ways to destroy someone's life, ways that were perfectly legal and infinitely more satisfying. I cracked my knuckles and got to work. The password to Vanessa's laptop was Whiskers123, our cat's name plus her birth year. After 8 years of marriage, I knew her better than she thought, or maybe she just never expected me to look. What I found in her work files folder made my stomach turn. Videos, dozens of them, dating back 6 months. Hotel rooms, Derek's office after hours, even our guest bedroom when I'd been out of town on a job. She'd documented their affair like it was a vacation, complete with timestamps and cute little notes. Derek's birthday surprise. Hope he likes the lingerie you bought me for Christmas. LOL. The note was attached to a video file I couldn't bring myself to open, my Christmas present to my wife, repurposed for her lover's pleasure. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. But it wasn't just the videos. There were text message screenshots, restaurant receipts, hotel bookings. Vanessa had been careless, or maybe she just didn't think I was smart enough to find them. She'd always seen me as the simple handyman, the guy who fixed broken things while she climbed corporate ladders in her designer heels. I copied everything to a flash drive and spent the rest of the night planning my next move. I could confront her, demand an explanation, maybe even suggest counseling. That's what the old Ethan would have done, the trusting fool who believed in second chances and the power of honest communication. But the old Ethan was gone, suffocated by 8 years of lies and a laptop full of evidence. The new Ethan had different ideas about justice. The next morning, I set up a little surprise in our dining room. I connected my laptop to our big screen TV and queued up the most damning video I could stomach watching. Vanessa and Derek in what appeared to be his office, her bent over his desk while I heard her car in the driveway and quickly paused the video on a frame that left no doubt about what was happening. Then I spread printed screenshots across our dining room table like a dealer laying out cards, each one showing a different aspect of their relationship. Text messages, receipts, calendar entries marking their rendezvous. Vanessa walked through the front door calling my name, probably expecting to find me in my workshop or watching TV in the living room. Instead, she found me sitting calmly at our dining table, hands folded, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal. "Ethan? What's all this?" Her voice was steady, but I caught the slight tremor, the way her eyes darted from the photos to the frozen video on the TV screen. "Sit down, honey," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Show's just starting." She remained standing, her purse clutched against her chest like armor. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but—" I said sit down. My voice carried a tone I'd never used with her before, cold and final. "Unless you'd prefer to have this conversation at your office, in front of Derek and all your colleagues." That got her attention. She slowly lowered herself into the chair, setting her purse on the floor. Up close, I could see the makeup covering dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly as she smoothed her skirt. "How long?" I asked. "Ethan, I can explain." "How long, Vanessa?" She stared at the photos scattered between us, her face cycling through emotions like a slot machine: denial, anger, fear, resignation. Finally, she settled on defiance. 6 months, she said, lifting her chin. Maybe 7. I nodded and clicked play on the video. The sound of her moaning filled our dining room, mixing with Derek's grunts of pleasure. Vanessa's face went white as she watched herself perform acts she'd refused to do with me for years, claiming they were degrading. "Turn it off," she whispered. "Why? You seem to enjoy making it." I let it play for another 30 seconds before pausing again. "There are 43 more videos, Vanessa. Some in hotel rooms, some in his office, some in our guest bedroom while I was working in Portland. You've been busy." She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "It just happened, Ethan. I never meant for it to go this far." "Just happened?" I laughed, and the sound was ugly even to my own ears. "You accidentally recorded yourself hooking up with your boss 43 times? That's some coincidence. Don't be crude." "Crude?" I gestured at the TV screen. "This is crude, Vanessa. This is my wife letting another man use her like a cheap whore while I'm out working to pay for the lingerie she's wearing in the video." She flinched at the word whore, but didn't deny it. How could she? The evidence was literally staring us both in the face. "What do you want?" she asked finally. That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? What did I want? A divorce would be messy, expensive, and ultimately unsatisfying. She'd get half of everything, probably including my workshop, and Derek would swoop in to comfort her through the difficult transition. They'd be married within a year, living happily ever after while I started over at 45. No, a divorce wasn't enough. I wanted something more comprehensive, more permanent. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to lose everything that mattered. "I want you to get dressed up," I said, standing and walking to our coat closet. "We're going out." "Where?" I pulled out her coat and held it open for her, the picture of a gentleman. "To see Derek, of course. I think it's time the three of us had a conversation." Derek's office was on the 3rd floor of a converted mill building overlooking the Penobscot River. Glass and chrome everywhere, the kind of modern design that prioritized style over substance. Like Derek himself. Vanessa had called ahead, told him I knew everything and wanted to discuss the situation like adults. What she didn't tell him was that I'd brought copies of everything, the videos, the photos, the receipts, a greatest hits collection of their affair, ready for public consumption. Derek was waiting for us in his corner office, trying to project confidence despite the sweat stains under his arms. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, probably going for the "let's work this out" look. Instead, he just looked guilty. "Ethan," he said, standing and extending his hand. "I'm glad you came. I think we can handle this situation in a mature, civilized manner." I ignored his outstretched hand and set my laptop bag on his glass desk. "Mature and civilized," I repeated. "Like hooking up with another man's wife in his guest bedroom?" Derek's hand dropped to his side. "Look, I understand you're upset." "Upset?" I opened my laptop and connected it to his wall-mounted monitor. "I'm not upset, Derek. I'm disappointed. See, I thought you were just a garden variety asshole, but it turns out you're also stupid." The first video started playing on his monitor. Derek and Vanessa in what was clearly his office, her dress hiked up around her waist while he took her from behind. The sound was crystal clear, including Vanessa's breathless confession that she loved him. "Turn that off," Derek said, lunging for the laptop. I caught his wrist and squeezed until he winced. "Careful," I said. "Wouldn't want to damage the evidence." Vanessa was sobbing in the corner, her face buried in her hands. "Please, Ethan, don't do this." "Do what? Show your boyfriend the home movies you made together?" I clicked to the next video. "This one's my personal favorite. Christmas Eve, while I was at my sister's house. You told me you had the flu, remember? But you look pretty healthy here." Derek had gone pale, his eyes fixed on the screen where he was unwrapping Vanessa like a present, her wearing the red lingerie I'd given her that morning. "What do you want?" he asked, echoing Vanessa's question from the night before. I paused the video and turned to face him. "I want you to understand something, Derek. You didn't just hook up with my wife. You picked the wrong guy to cross." "Are you threatening me? Threatening you?" I laughed and shook my head. No, Derek, I'm educating you. See, I spent 15 years as a forensic accountant before I started fixing things with my hands instead of spreadsheets. I know how to follow money trails, how to trace financial irregularities, how to document evidence in a way that holds up in court. I clicked to a new folder on my laptop. This one filled with financial records I'd pulled from public databases and Derek's own careless digital footprint. For instance, did you know that charging personal expenses to company accounts is considered embezzlement? Those hotel rooms you've been booking for your little rendezvous? The ones you've been writing off as client entertainment? That's a felony, Derek. His face went from pale to gray. You can't prove. Actually, I can. I turned the laptop screen toward him, showing a detailed spreadsheet of his fraudulent expenses over the past year. Ocean View Hotel, 43 separate charges, all claimed as business expenses. But here's the interesting part. I cross-referenced those dates with your actual client meetings, and guess what? No correlation. You've been stealing from your own company to finance your affair with my wife. Derek slumped into his chair, the fight going out of him like air from a punctured tire. What do you want? He asked again, but this time his voice was barely a whisper. I want you to call your wife, I said. Right now. Tell her you're having an affair with Vanessa. I can't. You can and you will, because if you don't, I'm going to email these financial records to your company's board of directors, along with a nice little video montage of you and Vanessa christening various hotel rooms on the company dime. Vanessa looked up from her hands. Ethan, please. Think about what you're doing. I am thinking, I said. I'm thinking about 8 years of marriage down the drain. I'm thinking about all the nights you came home late, claiming you were working while you were actually working Derek's cock. I'm thinking about how you looked me in the eye every morning and lied to my face. She flinched at my crude language, but I was past caring about her delicate sensibilities. Derek reached for his phone with shaking hands. What exactly do you want me to say? The truth, I said. Tell her you've been having an affair, that it's been going on for months, and that you're leaving her for Vanessa. But I'm not. You are now. I clicked to another video, this one showing Derek telling Vanessa he loved her, that he wanted to leave his wife and start a new life with her. Unless you'd prefer I send this to your wife instead? I have her email address, by the way. Found it in Vanessa's contact list. Derek dialed his home number, his hands shaking so badly he had to try twice. When his wife answered, I could hear her cheerful voice through the speaker. Hi, honey. You're calling early. Is everything okay? Derek looked at me, pleading silently for mercy. I gestured at the laptop screen where he was frozen in the act of professing his love for my wife. Linda, he said, his voice cracking. We need to talk. Word travels fast in a town the size of ours, especially when it involves sex, betrayal, and public humiliation. By the next morning, half of Main Street knew about Derek's affair, and by afternoon, the other half had heard an embellished version involving company embezzlement and secret video recordings. I didn't have to spread the rumors myself. Mrs. Carmody, our 70-year-old neighbor with the hearing of a bat and the discretion of a town crier, had overheard Vanessa's tearful phone call to her sister through our thin walls. Within hours, she'd shared the news with her bridge club, her church group, and anyone else who would listen. Vanessa hadn't come home the night before. She'd left Derek's office in tears after watching him confess to his wife, mumbling something about staying at her sister's place in Bangor. I'd let her go, knowing that running away would only make her look more guilty. I spent the evening in my workshop, organizing my tools and planning my next move. The confrontation with Derek had been satisfying, but it was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. My phone rang around 9 o'clock. Doug Henley, my old drinking buddy from before I got married. He worked construction now, but he'd been a cop for 20 years before retiring, and he still had connections throughout the county. Jesus Christ, Ethan, he said without preamble. Is it true? About Vanessa and that advertising prick? Depends on what you heard. I heard she was involved with her boss, got it all caught on camera, and you made him call his wife to come clean. I also heard something about stolen money and company credit cards. I smiled, impressed by how quickly the story had evolved in the telling. The affair part is true. The rest, well, let's just say Derek has some explaining to do to his employers. Doug whistled low. Shit, man. I'm sorry. 8 years of marriage, and she throws it away for some suit-wearing asshole. What are you gonna do? That was the question, wasn't it? I could file for divorce, take my 50%, and try to rebuild my life. I could report Derek's embezzlement to the authorities and let the legal system handle him. I could take the high road, turn the other cheek, and hope that karma would eventually catch up with both of them. Or I could do something more creative. I'm going to destroy them, I said, surprising myself with the calm certainty in my voice. Completely, thoroughly, and legally. Ethan. They humiliated me, Doug. Made me look like a fool while they laughed behind my back. Vanessa used our home, our bed, our marriage as props in her little love story. Derek stole company money to finance it. They both deserve whatever's coming to them. There was a long pause before Doug spoke again. You need help? I thought about it. Doug was loyal, discreet, and still had friends in law enforcement. He also had a mean streak when it came to cheating spouses, courtesy of his own ex-wife's infidelity. Maybe, I said. I'll let you know. The next morning, I drove to Vanessa's office building and waited in the parking lot. I wanted to see how she'd handle facing her coworkers after the story had made its rounds. Would she try to brazen it out, claim she was the victim of a vindictive husband? Or would she slink in through the back entrance, hoping to avoid the whispers and stares? She chose option 3. She didn't show up at all. Derek's BMW was in its usual spot, but I could see the damage that someone had done to it overnight. All 4 tires were slashed, the convertible top was shredded, and someone had keyed cheater across the hood in foot-high letters. I smiled, wondering which of his neighbors had taken justice into their own hands. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara, Vanessa's best friend and coworker. Can we talk? Important. I'd been expecting this. Tara was Vanessa's closest confidant, the one who'd probably known about the affair from the beginning and said nothing. She was also ambitious, attractive, and completely without scruples. Exactly the type of person who would try to play both sides of a scandal. We met at the Crooked Anchor, the dive bar where Doug and I used to drink before Vanessa decided it was beneath our social status. Tara was already there when I arrived, nursing a martini and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Ethan, she said, standing to give me an awkward hug. I'm so sorry about everything. I had no idea. Cut the shit, Tara. I ordered a beer and sat across from her. You knew exactly what was going on. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? She blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct approach. I don't understand. Sure you do. Vanessa's career is over. Derek's probably going to be fired, and you're wondering how to distance yourself from the whole mess without losing your own job. I took a sip of my beer, studying her face. The smart play would be to cooperate with me, help me understand exactly how deep this goes, and maybe salvage something from the wreckage. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot of a text conversation between her and Vanessa, dated 3 months earlier. Tara was asking for details about Derek's performance and offering to cover for Vanessa during her extended lunch breaks. I mean, you were an accessory to this whole thing, I said. You helped them coordinate their schedule, you lied to cover for them, and you probably knew about Derek's creative accounting practices. The question is, do you want to go down with them, or do you want to help me make sure they get exactly what they deserve? Tara stared at the phone screen, her face cycling through the same emotions I'd seen on Vanessa's face 2 days earlier. Finally, she looked up at me with something approaching respect. What do you need to know? 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the Crooked Anchor again, but this time I wasn't alone. Doug was there, along with half the town's construction crew and a few of the guys from the marina. Word had spread about Derek and Vanessa's downfall, and I'd become something of a local hero. the wronged husband who'd fought back and won. Derek had been fired from the advertising agency after an internal audit revealed over $30,000 in fraudulent expenses. His wife had filed for divorce and taken their 2 kids to her mother's house in Boston. The BMW had been repossessed after he defaulted on the loan payments, and his fancy McMansion was going into foreclosure. Vanessa had fared even worse. Tara's cooperation had revealed the full extent of her involvement in Derek's schemes, including her role in falsifying client reports and inflating project costs. The agency had not only fired her, but was considering criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. She was living in a studio apartment above the Chinese restaurant on Water Street, working part-time at a call center and trying to avoid the stares and whispers that followed her everywhere. But I wasn't done with them yet. "So what's the next move?" Doug asked, raising his beer in a mock toast. "Looks like they're already screwed." "Not quite," I said, checking my watch. "The real finale starts in about 10 minutes. As if on cue, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Derek's number, which surprised me since I'd heard he'd had his service disconnected for non-payment. "Ethan?" His voice was barely recognizable, hoarse, desperate, defeated. "I need to talk to you." "I'm listening." "Not on the phone. Can you meet me at the old amusement park, the one out on Route 15? I frowned. The Seaside Fun Park had been closed for 15 years, ever since the owner died and his kids couldn't afford to maintain it. It was nothing but rusted rides and rotting wood now, a monument to better times that would never come again. "Why there?" "Just, please. I have something that belongs to you. Something Vanessa wanted me to give you." The line went silent. Doug was watching me with interest, along with several other patrons who'd been following the saga like a soap opera. "Derek?" Doug asked. I nodded. "Wants to meet at the old amusement park. Says he has something of mine." "Could be a trap," Doug said. "Guy's got nothing left to lose." "Could be," I agreed. "But I don't think Derek has the balls for violence. He's more the type to run away and start over somewhere else." "You want backup?" I considered it. The smart play would be to bring Doug and maybe a couple of the other guys, just in case Derek had decided to go out in a blaze of glory. But something in his voice had sounded genuinely broken, like a man who'd finally accepted his fate. "No," I said, finishing my beer. "This is something I need to handle alone." The drive to the amusement park took 20 minutes, winding through back roads that hadn't seen much traffic since the place closed. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. Derek's rental car, a beat-up Honda that was a far cry from his former BMW, was parked near the entrance. I pulled up beside it and got out, listening to the sound of wind whistling through the abandoned rides. I found him sitting on the steps of the funhouse, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past month. His expensive suits had been replaced by jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt. His hair, once perfectly styled, hung limp and greasy around his face. "You came," he said, looking up as I approached. "You said you had something of mine." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small jewelry box. "Vanessa asked me to give this back to you. Said it wasn't right for her to keep it." I opened the box and found Vanessa's wedding ring, the one I'd saved for 6 months to buy. The diamond caught the last rays of sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across the faded paint of the funhouse. "She also wanted me to tell you she's sorry," Derek continued. "For what that's worth." "It's worth exactly nothing," I said, pocketing the ring. "Just like her apology." Derek nodded, as if he'd expected that response. "I know you probably won't believe this, but I'm sorry too. Not for the affair. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by claiming I regret that. But for the way it happened, for the lies and the sneaking around, you deserved better." "Yes," I said. "I did." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 men whose lives had been permanently altered by choices made in hotel rooms and office buildings. Finally, Derek spoke again. I heard Linda took the kids to Boston, filed a restraining order to keep me away from them. I heard that too. Vanessa won't return my calls. Says she never wants to see me again, that I ruined her life. He laughed bitterly. Funny how that works, isn't it? We destroyed your marriage, our own marriages, our careers, everything. And for what? 6 months of sneaking around like teenagers? You tell me, I said. Was it worth it? Derek was quiet for a long time, staring at the rusted skeleton of the Ferris wheel. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear him. No, he said. It wasn't. That's when I heard the cars pulling into the parking lot. 3 of them, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. Car doors slammed and I could hear voices. Doug's voice, along with several others I recognized from the bar. Derek looked up in alarm. What's going on? Justice, I said, standing up. The kind you can't get in a courtroom. The men from the bar were walking toward us, and they didn't look friendly. Doug was in the lead, carrying something in his hands that looked suspiciously like a baseball bat. Ethan, Derek said, scrambling to his feet. Whatever you're planning, don't do this. I'm already destroyed. My life is over. Isn't that enough? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a broken man who'd lost everything that mattered. His wife, his children, his career, his home, his dignity. In 6 months, he'd gone from successful executive to unemployed pariah, and it showed in every line of his face. You're right, I said, surprising both of us. It is enough. I turned toward Doug and the others, raising my hand to stop them. It's over, I called out. Go home. Doug looked confused, but he stopped walking. You sure about this, Ethan? I'm sure. After they left, Derek and I stood alone in the abandoned amusement park, surrounded by the ghosts of other people's good times. He was crying now, not bothering to hide it. Thank you, he whispered. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I walked back to my truck and drove away, leaving Derek alone with his regrets and his ruined life. 6 months later, I was back at the Crooked Anchor, but this time I was celebrating. The divorce had been finalized that morning, with Vanessa getting exactly what she deserved. Nothing. Her affair, combined with her role in Derek's embezzlement scheme, had voided any claim she might have had to marital assets. The house, the workshop, even her car were all mine. Doug raised his beer in a toast. To Ethan Ford, the man who proved that nice guys don't always finish last. Sometimes they finish first, added Tommy from the marina, right after they destroy everyone who screwed them over. I smiled and took a sip of my beer, savoring the taste of victory. It had been a long road from that first night when I'd caught Vanessa texting Derek, but every step had been worth it. Derek had left town 3 months earlier, last seen boarding a Greyhound bus with a single suitcase and a one-way ticket to somewhere in the Midwest. Word was he'd found work as a night janitor at a warehouse, a far cry from his former executive position. His ex-wife had gotten full custody of their children and a restraining order that would keep him away from them until they turned 18. Vanessa had lasted longer, trying to rebuild her life in our small town where everyone knew her story. But the whispers and stares had eventually worn her down. She'd left 2 weeks ago, claiming she was moving to Portland to start fresh. I'd heard through the grapevine that she was actually working at a truck stop diner in New Hampshire, serving coffee to long-haul drivers who didn't know or care about her past. Whatever happened to that friend of hers? Doug asked. The one who was helping them cover up the affair? Tara? I shrugged. Last I heard, she was working at a real estate office in Bangor. Turns out cooperating with me was the smartest thing she ever did. She kept her job, avoided any criminal charges, and learned a valuable lesson about choosing her friends more carefully. And you? Tommy asked. What's next for the legendary Ethan Ford? That was a good question. I'd spent so much energy on revenge that I hadn't given much thought to what came after. The house felt empty without Vanessa, but it was a clean kind of emptiness, like a wound that had finally healed. My business was thriving, apparently. Being known as the guy who'd outsmarted his cheating wife and her lover was good for my reputation. People trusted me to fix their problems because they'd seen how effectively I'd fixed my own. "I'm thinking about expanding the business," I said. "Maybe hire a couple of employees, take on bigger jobs. There's a lot of broken things in this world that need fixing." "And if you run into Derek or Vanessa again?" Doug asked. I considered the question, rolling it around in my mind like a fine wine. "I won't," I said finally. "They're both smart enough to stay far away from here. They know what happens to people who cross me." The conversation moved on to other topics: the Red Sox's chances this season, the new restaurant opening on Main Street, whose wife was sleeping with whose husband this week. But I found myself thinking about that night at the amusement park, when I'd had the chance to let Doug and the others finish what I'd started. I'd made the right choice, letting Derek walk away. Physical violence would have been satisfying in the moment, but it would have made me no better than them. Instead, I'd chosen a more elegant form of revenge. I'd let their own choices destroy them. Derek's greed and Vanessa's selfishness had been the weapons I'd used against them, and the results had been more devastating than any beating could have been. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart rate spiked, wondering if it was Vanessa or Derek trying to make contact. But when I opened it, I found something much more interesting. "Mr. Ford, my name is Jennifer Walsh. I heard about what you did to your cheating wife and her lover. I think I need your help with a similar situation. Can we meet?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Crooked Anchor. Come alone." Doug noticed my expression. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I said, pocketing my phone. "I think I just found my new calling." "What's that?" I finished my beer and stood up, leaving money on the bar. "Helping people fix their broken lives, one cheating spouse at a time." As I walked out of the Crooked Anchor, I could hear Doug laughing behind me. But he didn't understand. I wasn't joking. There were a lot of people in this world who'd been betrayed, humiliated, and cast aside by people they'd trusted. People who needed someone with my particular skills to help them balance the scales of justice. Vanessa and Derek had taught me something valuable. Revenge wasn't about violence or illegal schemes. It was about patience, planning, and using people's own weaknesses against them. It was about understanding that the best way to destroy someone wasn't to attack them directly, but to create the conditions for them to destroy themselves. I walked to my truck, whistling an old song I couldn't quite remember the name of. Tomorrow, I'd meet with Jennifer Walsh and learn about her particular problem. Then I'd help her solve it, the same way I'd solved my own. After all, I was Ethan Ford, and I fixed broken things for a living. Sometimes those things were kitchen cabinets and leaky faucets, and sometimes they were lives that needed a little creative adjustment. I drove home through the quiet streets of our small Maine town, past the houses where people were settling in for the night, trusting in their marriages, their friendships, their carefully constructed lives. Most of them would never need my services. But for those who did, I'd be ready. Because everyone deserves justice, even if they have to make it themselves.